Welcome to the Alternative Healers Coffee Chat. I'm Janel Mulligan. I'm a life mediator who empowers people struggling with overthinking to get to the root cause of their problem, strengthen their foundation of self-awareness, confidence, and agency. And the purpose of today's podcast is to acquaint listeners to different modalities and empower them on their healing journey. Today, I have with me Alicia Jackson, who has been a therapist for 15 years, trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, and motivational interviewing. However, the internal family systems IFS model has changed how she works with clients and sees the world. It's life-changing, and I agree. She has a passion to provide psychoeducation regarding IFS to those who don't have access via social media. Alicia, thank you.
Welcome. I'm so happy for the invite. Yeah.
And I'm thankful for you joining me. I learned about IFS beginning of last year, say March, April, and finally found my own IFS therapist in June. And you're right, it is absolutely life-changing. Like, if I had known about this practice, I may not have gone law. I may have gone psychology.
Yeah. It's really life changing. I came into the model 2019, and and then once I really entrenched in myself into the model, I'm like, why did I not know this before? Then I became angry. I had parts of me that were angry, like, why don't they teach this in schools? Why isn't this out here? So that's really what had that passion for, let's get this information out here for everybody, because this is again life changing. It's life changing.
It is. It's absolutely amazing, and the fact that you came into it right before the pandemic.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, there was definitely some divine intervention there. Yeah, that happened. Which the timing was great. I had just transitioned from working in community mental health and to private practice, and I was like, oh my goodness, oh what? And it made so much sense. It made so much sense. And I'm just grateful to have the information. I never thought I'd be one of those people who are like, this is my treatment modality that I do. And but I'm like an IFS nerd. I'm official.
Okay, love that. So my official IFS nerd, can we share with the listeners exactly what IFS is about and give them kind of that 3,000-foot level understanding of what IFS is about?
Yeah. Internal family systems is really taking a look at our internal world, those thoughts, those feelings that we have, even sensations in our body that are speaking to us constantly. And we hear, usually people are trying to tell us to shut the voices down or don't listen to the voices. We're actually leaning into those thoughts that we're having, leaning into the part of us that maybe binge eats, leaning into these parts of us to get to know them a little better, because what's happening is they're trying to protect us. They're trying to protect us from something, and usually it's a very softer space inside of us, right? It's usually a younger version of ourselves most of the time, but sometimes there are what we call older exiles. I'm trying not to use too technical terms, right? With this to really take in the model, because it is we all have these very soft, vulnerable spaces inside of us, and we worked really hard to protect them. And so internal family systems is about embracing all of us, all of us. Yeah. And we're not just one being, but we're multiple. And that can be a lot, because people tend to think, well, does that mean that I have multiple personality disorder? That's a very common question, but I understand that, because that's really the only reference we have to someone being multiple, other than cloning. Or so that's the only idea. And so, yeah, we are, because we say it all the time. Part of me feels this way, but part of me feels that way. And so that lets you know that there's multiple parts of you that feel differently and oftentimes feel like polarized differently. And that is has been great to just dive into my own internal world, but also in giving an invitation for others to dive into their internal world because it helps give them so much clarity. And it's great to see all those light bulb and aha moments for the people, even in social media that I'm, giving information to, but also my clients. So I love it.
I can imagine on social media, it's kind of like one of those abilities, like people now learning about ADD and
Mm,
autism and all of
yeah.
these neurospacey parts of us.
Hmm.
And going, oh, there is more to me than, especially, I'll say the older generations where a lot of this wasn't even a thing. Like therapy alone was a bad word. So let alone thinking, oh, you have parts to you and
Yeah.
all of that. And the permission, one of the things I love about this is the permission it gives you to give yourself more grace.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Embrace your humanity. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
and when you can say it's a part of me that's mad, that when you were told anger, being angry is bad, or any big emotion is bad, when you kind of can look at it separately and go, this part of me, it's not me, it's not the I am this, it's a part of me that's experiencing this. It
Yeah.
frames it so differently internally to be able to go, oh, this might not be so bad. um and that's one of the things I adore about it. Now, have you seen kind of your clients embracing that permission that this gives them? Have you seen that at all?
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's a journey. I think sometimes it takes clients a while to really take in that, oh, there's different parts of me. And then once it's embraced, there it's almost like a comical thing where it's not so stigmatizing, right? And it opens up the opportunity for clients to be more honest. And so like you said, saying a part of me is angry or a part of me is jealous, those emotions are there's so much meaning attached to
Mhm.
those words. And so saying like, oh, my client's like, yeah, there's a part of me that wants to harm this person because they're, like just
Mhm.
to open that up where sometimes that part of them may not even have a voice because the client feels shame about the fact that a part of them wants to hurt someone who did them wrong, right?
Yep.
And not to say that they're, going to follow through with it, but they're just saying this part of me is like they deserve some type of payment for how they treated us. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I hear that one, right? So let's talk to it. Let's like get to understand a little bit more how it shows up for you instead of it never having a space. And even with clients who are having thoughts of unaliving themselves, and there's so much stigma and there's so much weight to that in therapy because I mean, you see it everywhere where clients say, don't be too honest with your therapist because they're going to they're going to put you away or that, which there's I could go on a soapbox about that, how that needs to be just a much more welcoming environment for people who need to take care of themselves.
Yep.
And at the same time, that part needs to have a space to speak, right? And oftentimes it's really just trying to like, hey, let's find a way that we don't have to deal with this pain. Let's let's
Yeah.
this seems like a great strategy. Let's just figure this out.
Y-
And
Yeah.
yeah,
And as the people who feel seen and heard, that's when they start healing. And that
yeah,
kind of goes with our parts too. We just see that as a human thing. Oh, when we hear that saying, when you feel seen and heard. Why is my mouth? When you feel seen and heard, you heal. And people are like, oh yeah, that's true. But then they don't really that's a very superficial kind of saying. A lot of people take it
oh
like,
yeah,
on the face value, but when they actually start doing that for themselves, that holding space for themselves is so amazing. Like,
when they start to see themselves, because we do delegate that to others. We want other people to see us and feel us and acknowledge us to understand us. And, people, we're limited. We're limited because we have our own stuff. And so when we take time to see us, I mean, even in my own work, like I was telling my therapist, like I have a part that just like, I want people to appreciate me. She's like, have you appreciated you? And it's like,
ooh.
oh, oh.
I would have felt
And
a little called out on that one.
yeah, I'm like, okay. But then I took some time and like really explored what my journey has been in the area where I was looking for appreciation. I was like, oh, yeah. Like you haven't even been aware of everything that you've experienced. And that's really what this one is saying. Like, look at everything that has happened. And you need to acknowledge that. And so giving yourself that space and acknowledging it for you and your experiences, which it can be, it can be a lot because you're opening your awareness, things that, sometimes our protectors will have us check out a little bit or we're busy, so we're not really attending to how we're feeling through whatever we're going through. Life doesn't stop when something distressing happens to us. And
Hmm.
so, I think that was one of the things that made it so difficult during the pandemic because life did kind of stop in a way for some people, and they just were left with the parts of them that they've been distracting themselves from. And they're like, oh,
Ooh.
this, okay, okay, these voices are here, these thoughts are here. I need to attend to them. And when you do give yourself that space to see and feel your experiences, whoo, it it can be overwhelming and also clarity, giving you so much clarity about and appreciating your journey. So it's a beautiful journey. So,
So I know you mentioned you don't want to go too much into technical terms, but the protectors, the managers and firefighters, when I kind of realized these roles they play,
mm,
it really helped give me perspective. And again, that goes back to that permission and grace. So can you share and explain to the audience more what a manager and a firefighter are?
absolutely. So managers are proactive protectors, right? They're on the front line. And this is one of these words that people have a lot of feelings about. They try to maintain control. And so when people are accused of being controlling, it's because they are interacting with someone's manager who is trying to protect a pain from being reactivated or re-triggered, right? So if someone has experienced, let's even use something like just some embarrassment around being late, right? Like they walked in on a meeting and everybody looked at them and they're like, so they may have a manager now that is always up looking at the clock, making sure that never happens again, right? So that's something very small, but it could, right, be distressing, especially depending on the work environment, whatever. So that is a manager. Now, firefighter, I have a love affair with firefighters because they're reactive protectors. They're stigmatized quite a bit because
Yes.
they they don't care about the damage that they cause. Like a firefighter, they just want to put the fire out. If they douse your whole house and they damage all the family heirlooms, they damage the TV, everything is just the house is is just not livable, right? But the fire's gone, right?
Hmm.
The fire's gone. So if the manager has made a failure, which we know that the control is just an illusion, right? And so if they're in that same example, if there's an embarrassing moment, the traffic happens, you're caught back in a situation where you're late, then maybe one of the firefighters that may happen is, hey, you might dissociate and just check out for the rest of the day. and not really attend to people looking and staring at you like, oh, she's never prepared. She's always, and just to take you out of the moment. And like I said, firefighters are really stigmatized. So I've grown to really appreciate the work because they are always faithful. They're always going to show up for us. And it's the reason why. It's the reason why they're doing it. They really want to protect.
Yeah. And they show up in so many different ways as well. And I think part of what I find so interesting is a part you can have similar parts, like one that is a firefighter that, binge eating, that can
Mm-hmm.
be a,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
manager part in some ways, and it can also be a
Yeah.
firefighter part.
Yeah. Yeah.
And respecting that both are good and were created for a reason, and then giving them the opportunity to share that reason with you.
Mm-hmm.
How is it helping protect you?
Yeah. It's oftentimes when a client hears like, oh, the part of me that's been binge watching shows is at night when I really should be like sleeping, when I really need to get rest. Because I have a full day, like I have very long days. Like I just want you to have time for you. I just want you to relax, to work. And then you're like, oh, that's like that's so sweet. Like that's a very warm intention. And there's the embrace that happens internally, like an internal hug almost that happens when you do get to hear the parts, like their intention and really how they're looking out for you. Like you work way too much. You need to enjoy your time and finding a way, right, where we can find a centered way, right, a centered way to balance. Because they often have requests from us too.
Mhm.
And so that one that's binge watching shows may say, hey, maybe can we not maybe just look at how much time you're taking for tasks through the day and see if we can, give yourself some time in there, right? Oh, okay. Hmm. And and sometimes the requests are really big. And so it's best to be honest, right? It's best to be honest with them because they're like children. Children, you give them a promise, they're going to hold you to it. You said you're going to take us to McDonald's after school today, and it is after school, and it is today. So,
Yep.
holding, being honest that builds the trust in the relationship with our managers and our firefighters because they usually know us better than we know ourselves.
Exactly. I mean, they've seen everything we've been through that we may not be ready to consciously acknowledge yet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And giving them that trust, and that's one of the things I find very interesting is how it kind of builds that self-trust, um and self being both the little s and the big S. And
Mhm.
so let's first, before we go further, is share with the audience that you've talked about leading yourself and kind of helping manage yourself. um in IFS there is the term self,
Yeah, yeah,
and how can you share how that looks, from the inside, I guess, is the
yeah. Well, true self is something we are all born with, and life somehow pushes these things out, right? And we have a version, right, of how we maybe manage our calm when true self just is calm, right? We may have a managed part of how we feel courageous, right? Or feel confident and 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 self just is confident, right? And just has courage to step out there, right? I have a part of me that's polarized. Like I have a part of me that plunges. And that's the part of me that went out to social media and made the platform. I have a part of me that sits back in the back of the classroom and hopes no one sees me being quiet, right? So someone says, "Oh, I found your YouTube videos." I'm like, "Oh, you did?" That one in the back of the class is
It's
like,
like,
And so in the middle, right, true self is confidence, right? And that comes out when we really try to make that space. You're talking about making that space for our parts and embracing our humanity. It opens up opportunity for us to have access to more self energy. And and then as a internal feminist therapist, I'm modeling that. So I'm making sure that I'm in self as well with the client and monitoring my parts. Like, hey, sit back for a moment. Or if I have a part that's very vocal and wants to say something, I'll say, okay, I have a part that wants to make sure X, Y, and Z. Take it or leave it. But this one is up, right? But making sure I'm in self so then they can know, right, what that looks like, what that feels like for themselves internally and allow themselves to embrace it as well. It's
I I
beautiful.
love that you are allowing yourself to bring the parts into your therapy sessions because, like you said, you're modeling self, but then you're also modeling what it's like to self mediate, to be that person going, okay, I hear you, making the discernment and the decision, okay, I'm going to allow this voice to be heard, this part's voice, and showing the client that this is how it can look. Like
Yeah,
this is possible. This
yeah.
and um I'm also a trained mediator, and that's kind of one of the things. As a mediator, you sit at the table and model good communication. You're trying
Mhm.
to show the clients that, hey, this kind of communication is possible between you two. You don't need me ultimately, but in the meantime, I'm here for you. And what you do in that is absolutely gorgeous, by providing that space of modeling both self and modeling that this is what it can look like when you start holding that space for your parts and actually listening to them.
Mhm. Yeah. Leaning in. And it's a challenge because even leaning in, there's when we talked about the polarizing parts, there's usually another part of it that's like, "Ooh, don't listen to this. They're gonna get us off the rail. They're gonna this binge eating part is going to get us off the rails. We have a goal. Okay. Summer's here. We have a goal. Right. And so there's this internal, right, struggle. So if we lean in to listen to this binge eating part, it's going to put us in a situation, right, where we're going to dive into this energy versus, right, feeling on the opposite end, being like hyper focused around food, right? And so, yeah, but we need to listen to both parts. So for polarization, we listen to both of them and we handle it
Yeah,
with
it's
care.
like those two parties at the table that are like, no, I
Hmm.
want this, no, I want that. Okay, you both have very valid reasons,
Yeah,
and giving them that acknowledgement. Sometimes the parts look at, like, it feels like, they look at you and go, wait, I'm right, like, and
yeah,
yes, you are right, and doesn't
yeah.
have to be this way. um and I kind of, you, in the example you gave earlier about the overworking part and the disassociation by TV, there are so many societal demands and expectations, working your hiney off, um you know not paying attention to our bodies, all of these things that when you explore the IFS process, you start to see the um, disconnect in how we are in fact living and how our bodies and our systems and we need to live.
Mhm.
And that's hard, breaking those ingrained expectations, especially when they came from being young, that you sacrifice yourself for the
Mhm.
house, the car, the etc. And allowing those voices inside going, the sacrificing isn't good, this isn't helping me.
It's not working. And that's the part of IFS that I love is the bigger systems, bringing the bigger systems into the work because it really helps to reduce shame, right? When we realize, like, oh, how capitalism impacts the family system and our internal family system, right?
Mhm.
How like oppression and all of that like impacts if we have this system that's world system, right? That's telling us that we need output versus us being human, then yeah, we're going to be focused on task versus our own humanity. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So in your practice, what has been, I'll say, kind of the most mind-boggling or beautiful journeys you've seen someone go on through the IFS journey, just to give somebody an idea of what this could look like, kind of start to finish. Like, well, it's never
Yeah.
finished. I wish I could say it
Oh,
was finished. It's never finished. But
oh
start
yeah, it's a
to a
journey.
point. Definitely a journey.
Yeah, I think especially from a space where someone is just introduced to the model, and I'm having to like balance being right, being in self and being um, present for them, and also teaching the model at the same time, doing that, and then getting to the space where they're knowing, attending to their parts, tracking their parts during the week, they're listening to their parts, communicating with them. It it's just beautiful to see, and then hearing them during session and just like, oh, that feels so great. I just had to know like these two parts, even though they're like they're both looking out for me. Like it's just like this level of self acceptance that is beautiful to experience and also to witness. As again, there's just the thought out there that we're supposed to shut these voices out, and it feels like you're the enemy, you're wrong if these voices still are present when really they're a part of you. And to not embrace them would be not embracing a part of you and your experiences. A reason why, right? This one, like you were talking about overthinking, there's a reason why this overthinking part is here, right? And so embracing it and hopefully attending to that little one, right? So that it doesn't have to work so hard. That's the goal. And so when those clients are able to release those thoughts and those beliefs that it took on at very young ages, it's just beautiful. It's beautiful. I think also, I think we talk a lot about how like some of our minds or parts will like repress negative memories. Sometimes they'll repress even positive memories because it doesn't know. It's confused, like how life has changed. It's like we don't know what to do with these memories, so we're holding them off. And then clients get the unburdening happens, and then all of these positive memories start flooding back. They're like, oh yeah, I remember that when I was in the backyard, and I remember this, and like that just can be just a beautiful experience too. That they get access to like some really wonderful memories that their younger self just didn't know how to where to put it. So like this life right now, this doesn't make sense. These happy memories with how life is going doesn't make sense. I'm gonna hold them. And then once they release those beliefs, it's like, oh, okay, we can have these. We can have these memories now. We can have these beautiful memories. So it's been a beautiful experience. And even in our training, I think IFS World is very welcoming, and it's beautiful to see people having really hard conversations, like really hard conversations about race relations, like stuff that we normally try to avoid, lean into, and talk about it from an honest space, right? From our part, and be and have space to hear each other. Uh, it would be wonderful if that could happen outside of the IFS bubble. And that's that yeah, that's my big goal. It's a very big, so I understand that, but I think that would really help reduce some of the polarization we see in our world, because it's definitely right parts fighting for control, right? And it makes sense. And like you said, both parts, right? There's some validity to it. We need to hear each other. So just having that space to hear each other, wow, beautiful to witness.
I agree completely. I mean, I think about that and I'm like, "Ah, that would allow so much healing on so many different levels if people would get curious to that point." And, kind of back to the point where we were talking about giving yourself permission and grace when you can say, there's a part of me that thinks X, Y, and Z, even though we know it's not kind, we know it's, you know, biased and
Mm.
motivated from a place that we don't in fact want to be from. And there's that other part that's like, well, it's what's kept us safe.
Absolutely.
We were told having these X, Y, and Z thoughts are better to not, and like, because again, it takes the self away from that negative experience and allows people to look at it. And it would be absolutely amazing to give people that opportunity to be curious if they were willing.
Yeah. Curiosity has been a beautiful gift that IFS has given me. I didn't realize how much big systems were stifling my curiosity. And so just opening that up and how powerful curiosity can be for us internally, but even in our relationships, because we have parts of us that are so quick to like judge what someone's saying or feel like they know what someone means when they say X, Y, and Z versus saying like, "I'm okay, you said that. What did you tell me more about that?" And then like, what did you mean? Like in a very aggressive way, but no, like, I want to know what you meant when you said that because I really want to hear you. All right, that feels different, and leaning into that. But yeah, curiosity is such a beautiful gift. I've embraced and has really helped me to open up my world to spaces where doors were closed before. Right?
So you've mentioned big systems, and I want to make sure kind of we're all on the same
Yeah.
definitional page. I think I know what you mean, but I don't want to assume.
Hmm.
So share with you kind of your perspective of, I'll say, levels of systems. I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah. Big systems. How I classify them, and I don't know if it's the IFS term. It's just my language I use. But IFS, we have legacy burdens. That's what we would. Legacy burdens are things that are passed down through generations that aren't really ours, but have become ours because of thoughts and beliefs out there. So an example could be children are to be seen and not heard. Like that's a legacy burden. We I didn't come up with that. Janelle, you didn't come up with that, but it's out there. We've heard it and it impacts how we see children, whether we want to be honest about it or not, right? And so then add on if the big systems, like in my world, definitely systemic racism is a big system in my world. Capitalism is a big system in right all of our world. It impacts all of us, and it impacts how we interact with each other, right? So all and impacts our internal world. So one with our society being even well, I'll say American society, because some cultures shame is a positive thing, but here in the United States of America, shame is no bueno how it is dispensed, right? Shame means you are bad versus I made a mistake, I'm human, right? And shame is how it shows up in our system. Shame, we have an internal shamer that's usually a firefighter. Usually, is a firefighter that's coming in right to tell us that we're a horrible person if we we drop the ball. And that's definitely an impact of a huge system, right? And it shows up through our culture, especially in social media. We will take down someone for doing one human thing, and yeah, it really impacts in how we see ourselves and interact with each other.
And I think that's beautiful and huge because I hadn't really thought about the big systems per se. Like there's that level of kind of awareness, but it's always kind of out here.
Yeah,
And especially if you are doing IFS therapy, you have your hour session, so you're kind of hyper focused on, okay, this is what's on the table right now. Um, but being able to kind of step back and get that 3,000-foot view of, oh my goodness, are so many things informing me and my parts,
Yeah.
and how I now interact with the world. And like you mentioned earlier, that's overwhelming. That's
Mm, it's huge.
scary shit.
It's huge. If you think about, like, I hear so many children say, like, man, my parents didn't care about who I was or my feelings. They just cared about how I did in school. Well, because probably what was happening was your parents right, were concerned about your survival in a capitalist world. So they know you needed to have good grades in order to get a good job, in order to take care of yourself, right?
Yep.
There's care and love and all of that, but how it impacts the kid, it's like they don't care about my feelings. They don't care about if I had a good day or not. All they care about is my grades. And they feel invalidated. Well, like that's how capitalism is impacting a parent-child relationship. And that that parent probably had the same experience from their parent and vice right,
Yep.
and how the fear of lack, right, the fear of poverty, and because the United States has told us that if you don't take care of yourself, you know, it's it's on you, right?
Yeah.
There's only so many programs and relief that you're going to get, but still, that's not where you want to be.
Yeah.
So it's on you, and where other cultures and aren't that way. And this isn't trying to bash the United States of America. This is just where we are. This
Yeah.
is where we
I
are.
mean,
And
we have generations before us that went through the depression,
right.
and they learned from experience, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not invalidating that experience. It's just
Mm,
now that we are in a very different world, and so those approaches, the way they survive, doesn't help us survive. And that's so hard for them to see because they're still carrying that trauma and fear. And so they are literally handing it down through the next generations. And to take the time to go, oh, that's where that came from, and I can understand now. And if you forgive or not forgive, that's
right.
totally up to you. But it's
Yeah.
also just that curiosity and acceptance of, okay, now I see where it came from, now I get to choose. And I think that's one of the things I also love about IFS, is that ability to let ourselves and our parts and all of the things make choices. It's empowering the parts of us, and therefore empowering ourselves,
Yeah.
um, to make choices, to figure out, what do I want to do next, versus what does society tell me I have to do next, or my
Right.
mom, or um that. So that's interesting to kind of then, like I said, zoom out at that the big system level, and
Mm-hmm.
see how that trickles down to
Right.
those choices.
And also, when you're talking about choice, what came up for me was too that IFS, it really um, it really focuses and has the intent to get permission and consent, right, from our protector. Like just in my last therapy session, my my therapist was like, "Is this part want to know, or is this part open to knowing, you know, who you are now?" And this part said, "No, I'm good." And I had to relay that message. I was just laughing, like, okay, with this one's being, and this one is holding ground, and I understand exactly why it was, and she validated, like, I just appreciate that this one said, no, this is not, we don't feel comfortable doing this right now,
Yep.
and that felt even more invalidating, right? So I think sometimes we just want permission to say no so we can and know that it's going to be validated and respected. And then you're like, oh, okay. All right. I'll open up. Okay. I'll see what you're talking about. All right. I'll be more inclined to, right, to lean in because there's there's so many times that our voice isn't heard. There's so many times that we have to go through something that we didn't really want to consent. I don't think anybody consented to like capitalism. Nobody consented. We didn't say, yes, we would like to participate in this capitalist society. Yes. No, nobody did that. And so now we're here and we're just like, okay, now I have all these systems and ideas have been placed upon us. Like you were saying, we are carrying beliefs and burdens that are like decades, centuries old. And it can be overwhelming and even heartbreaking sometimes to think about like we're still here. Like we're still here. And sometimes I think too I speak for my community, and there's a struggle now. I'm noticing there's this polarization where even Black people don't want to talk about therapy anymore. They're like they're tired of it. They're like, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to talk about it. And there's people who feel the obligation and burden to, right? And there's this huge polarization there because it's still impacting us like in 2023, which is crazy and it's here, but there's just like, ah, did that happen? How many, right? Like, and we're still here? Like, yeah, yeah, we're still here because we really haven't looked at it and really haven't been given space to look at it. You have to say that, right? Yeah,
And goes back to that permission and consent
yeah,
beautifully, like,
mm-hmm,
and that is actually one of the things I absolutely adore about IFS is that permission and consent, is like you said, giving that part the chance to say no, because we
yeah,
don't typically get that opportunity in real life. And
mm-hmm,
no, you'll still be loved, you'll still be okay,
mm-hmm,
and you get to choose how you move forward with that. And you mentioned something earlier about the witnessing, and I think to that same extent is somebody, it being witnessed either by ourselves and the therapist or whomever is helping hold space, that you said no and it's okay, and they're like, oh, I'm seen, I'm witnessed, this is possible.
like, oh, I get to say no, right? Because we talked about the polarizing part, so there's probably another one that's like wanting to be agreeable and say, okay, 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 and so this one's like, oh, I get to win this time. Like I get to because we talk about therapists all the time. We talk about how important it is to say no, say no, say no. We just talk about how difficult that is, how socially just like it's not really accepted. It's just not like, okay, okay. Like so sometimes it just doesn't feel safe to say no. Because that's a lot of risk there. So, okay, now we're actually creating a space and a therapeutic environment for a part of you to say no like that. That's, it can be mind-boggling, right, to them and to accept that uh, right. We all have that right, but man, it doesn't always feel safe to use that right.
Definitely not. And I love that you brought up, even as therapists and healers, anybody who is in a modality of healing, there is this, again, polarizing part that's like, okay, I know I need my boundaries and I'm meant to be helping heal. So how do I say no to somebody I know that needs or wants me? Like
Oh,
that guilt, that, shame of saying, I don't have the space, I can't hold space for you right now. So I love that you said that, because I think that is so important for everyone, and especially people who are in healing modalities, to give themselves that permission to say no,
mm,
and take care of themselves as well.
yeah, I am still paying for me overworking during the pandemic. I,
Ooh.
yeah, 2020, I was just, I mean, going. And last year, it was like the end of last year, I had a part of me that was like, we're going to take 2 weeks of vacation in November and we're going to take 2 weeks of vacation in December. And I had a part that was panicking. Like, what? What are we going to do? What? No, 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 we can't do this. We can't do this. And And then I really sat with that one. That was like, we need to take 2 weeks. And it's like, okay, we need more space for ourselves. Is that what you're saying? Okay. All right. All right. Making now some space because right there was this burden. People were in like dire need. And so I was like, okay, I need to make more space in my calendar. I'm like, I'm doing anything else, right? There's nothing, nowhere we can go. I'll make more space. And I realized like, oh, there was so much I was dealing with, right? And I needed to have space to unwind. There was so much happening in that time, like it's still happening. So yeah, giving yourself permission to do that
Well, and
with the
especially at that
healing.
time, and being a healer of types, it's so easy to be like, okay, I'm going to push myself aside and do that. And, it sometimes we see the need more than we see ourselves, and in our
Mm.
kind of trauma response, potentially, at least I can speak for myself, my trauma
Yeah.
response is to put myself aside and jump in, because that's easier. It's easier to care for somebody else than it is to
Oh yeah.
dig into those parts and have those hard spaces and emotional spaces. um so yeah, that's so important. So important.
Absolutely.
So we are getting close to time. If you have one message for the listeners that you would like them to know, what would you like to say to them?
What I will say is, I know that there are a lot of voices out there about healing, and I would say to tune in and listen to your inner voice, uh, because I think sometimes we feel like others know better. You know, I have come to know that as an internal family systems therapist, that the client system knows that their part can tell me more than my 15 years of experience. They know they've been with you. Your parts have been with you and been paying attention to everything that you've experienced because they have been hyper vigilant about protecting you in that. So they know. So I would say listen to your voice. Listen to your voice and tap in to your internal world. You'll be surprised at what you hear about
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you. And if somebody was to be looking for an IFS therapist, are there any keywords or things that you would recommend for them to keep in mind as they're exploring? Because the IFS database is growing from what I've seen. I actually
Yeah, it
tried to
is.
sign up for the class, and it's a lottery system at this point. Like,
Yes, it's
um,
very annoying. I have parts that are up about that.
and so, it's a blooming place, and you can start finding therapists, but as everything, you need some level of discernment.
Yeah,
And what would you recommend for them to consider as they're if they start looking for an IFS therapist?
I would recommend one, they can look on the IFS Institute. They have a directory there. And at least looking anyone who's on the IFS Institute directory, they are at least level one trained, meaning they've gone through the first batch of training, and so they have a really good grasp of the model. So some people are IFS informed, and and that's okay too as well, right? But I being level one IFS um, will help you know that they have at least been through, right, and you have a good grasp of the model. Because even prior to mine, like I felt like I went to consultations and had an understanding, but once you've gone through the level one training, you're going to like experiential training. So there, you're actually in the training, doing your own work, and so it's just it's a huge process, internal process, and you learn so much about experiencing the model yourself through the training. So as long as they've gone through level one, that would be a great indicator. And then listening to your system, do you feel safe, right, with that person? Because I think sometimes we'll see that someone has all these letters behind their name and say, okay, well, all right, I'm going to keep going. But listen to listen to your system. If you're feeling like this isn't a good match, listen, yeah, listen.
So this actually just brought up an idea. I know in therapy, typically you have to be licensed in the state that you're practicing.
Yeah. Mhm.
Does that apply with IFS as well, or how is
Uh,
that working? Because I can see that.
mhm. Yeah, IFS practitioners, they don't have to practice, and to my knowledge, they don't have to practice in the same state. Like for me, I am licensed in Michigan, so I have to practice in Michigan. Um, there's a part of me that's like, could I do practicing in other states? But then the other part of me that said, no, you need more space and your schedule comes up. So, but definitely, I think IFS practitioners can practice
Okay.
in yeah.
Okay, good to know. So if anybody would want to get a hold of you, to find your
Yeah.
TikTok, watch any of your videos, where can they find you?
Well, Alicia Jackson, LPC, everywhere. So I'm on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I said that's where I draw the line. I'm not doing Snapchat. No more social media platforms. I hope they don't come out in another one the next year or two. There's a lot
Oh,
to juggle all these platforms.
amen to that. Like, wow. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been lovely to chat with you.
Seriously now, I'm excited and I'm glad I've joined your pod or I've subscribed to your channel. So I'm glad that I'll be able to get to learn more about more alternative healing. I even on my channel I did an interview with a hypnotherapist and learned so much about hypnotherapy that I didn't understand. And there's a lot of parallels between IFS and hypnotherapy. So it was like really, yeah,
Yeah,
really
that's part
great
of
to
what drew me
learn.
to it. Yep.
Yeah, understand it. So yeah, I'm so grateful that our paths crossed.
Thank you. And to the listeners, please like, subscribe, and follow both of us. Have a great day.